We were sitting one day and my mother was sitting and crying. This was a month and a half before she passed away. And she's sitting there and she's crying. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I know my time is close, that I'm going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lady who's on basically the last legs of her life, but she's so motivated now. She's memorizing Surah Rahman, she's memorizing more Quran, and then a few weeks after that, she passes away. So that really shook me.
The power of community engagement is a force for positive change. And this is the reality for Helping Hands regional managers, whose roles are as dynamic as they are pivotal to our mission's success. In this episode, we take a journey to gain insight into the passion, determination, and innovative spirit that drive our regional managers to effect change in their communities. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to this episode of Helping Hands Giving is Living podcast series. Today, we are happily joined by our brother Asad Patel, Helping Hands Regional Manager. Brother Asad, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mamdouh, how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. We want to start by your journey. We want to hear your journey into Helping Hand and what led you to take on this significant responsibility.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so it's a pretty detailed story. Inshallah, I'll go over that. And there's many points which basically led me to why I am here and why I'm at the point that I'm at. So I basically grew up in a family that originates from Gujarat, India, from both sides, mother's and father's side, and they immigrated to Pakistan. Economically challenged people. When they immigrated, a lot of people who lived in Pakistan at that point were very economically challenged. So they took care of each other. If you lived in a building with 5 families, all 5 families, they came from different backgrounds, they looked out for each other. And till today, we still have connections with those families. That the families that my father grew up with, they still live close to us in the United States. So they traveled together wherever they went. My father, he left home at a very young age. He, in search of helping out his family, he came back, he got married, he brought my mother to America. When I was younger, we were, economically challenged, but we were happy, alhamdulillah. That's the main thing of trying to be happy. After that point, my father, he started a business, and alhamdulillah, after a few years, the business started doing really well. And they decided to send me to Pakistan when I was younger to memorize the Quran. And when I went to memorize the Quran, I was at a school. In the school, this was post 9/11. A lot of the students were refugees from many different countries. Most of them didn't know whether their parents were alive anymore, because this wasn't the age of WhatsApp where you can just pick up and call somebody from a phone. So, it was, you got to see real life. Basically, we were there all day from morning till evening, from Ba'd al-Fajr, to before you go to sleep, basically late after Isha. And we lived very close by. So I got to see real life how refugee children live. And the school tried to provide the best that they could, but living without a mother or father is not very easy. And then, I came back, I went to college, I got married. And after I got married, my mother, she found out I got married in Pakistan. So we applied for paperwork for my wife, and it was almost done. And one day we were remodeling the house, and my mother had a pain in her arm. She went to the doctor. She comes back. She has some tests. She comes back after a few weeks. I come home and she's crying. And I'm like, what's going on? Why are you crying? She's washing dishes. After I come back from college, every day we'd sit and we'd talk. I'm an only child. So my mother and me, we were best friends. So we're talking and she's crying and she's like, I have cancer and it's stage 4. And that really, it ripped me. And, my wife, she got her paperwork soon after. I brought her. And, the next few months were very important in my journey of shaping me as a person. Because there was a point in time, I have a very close friend. He did hers with me. His name is Shafiq. And his mother had passed away from cancer a few years prior. And I saw what happened to him. And, mentally, it's really shocking. And then my mother, one day, she's talking to me, and I'm 29 at this point. And she's like, you know, you're very lucky you got to spend this much time with me, this many years. There's many kids around the world whose parents pass away from cancer, from many other diseases, like your friend Shafiq, and they're very young, and it completely changes the trajectory of their life. And you're at a point in time where you're older now, so you sort of know your direction. She's like, after I pass away, make sure you help those kids whatever way you can. You know, raise money for them, do whatever you can, help those kids out so their lives, although they may lose a parent, but they have some support. And you know, that was basically one of the main sticking points. The next one was, we were sitting one day and my mother was sitting and crying. This was a month and a half before she passed away, and she's sitting there and she's crying, and I'm like, what's going on? She's like, you know, I know my time is close, that I'm going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that was the day that Junaid Jamshed, who was a very famous Pakistani munshid, he passed away. And I told her, I was like, look, nobody knows when they're going to pass away. Junaid Jamshed had actually visited us a few years before he'd come to my house. He had spent some time with us. And we saw he was a very healthy, very energetic individual who you wouldn't see passing away instantly. He passed away in a plane crash, obviously. It wasn't due to natural causes, like a disease or something. But I told my mother, I was like, anybody can pass away at any time. So don't think like that. I was like, you may have a long life ahead of you, but at the same time, take value in whatever time you have left. We were both crying. I was newly married. I didn't have any kids or anything, you know, that could, you know, deviate her attention away from what's gonna happen. Obviously, we're all gonna pass away. Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, but we think we're gonna live very long and healthy lives. So we had this conversation a few weeks after that. Subhanallah, she memorized Surah Rahman in 3 days. A lady who's on basically the last legs of her life, but she's so motivated now. She's memorizing Surah Rahman, she's memorizing more Quran, and then a few weeks after that, she passes away. So that really shook me. And then another thing that shook me was my wife, when we were expecting, um, they did an ultrasound, and when they did the ultrasound, they perceived that something was wrong, and they told us that the baby may not make it. And that really had an effect on me, because this was 6 to 8 months after my mother had passed away. The next month of my life was one of the most difficult months. I barely slept, because I'm like, look, I just lost my mother. I'm basically going to lose my child now too. And it was so difficult. And at that point, I was like, I have to do something to give back to the community as well. I was like, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing me. I'm not doing enough. Just giving sadaqah is not enough. Just making sure you take care of your zakat is not enough. You know, but alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with a healthy boy. He's born healthy. There were no problems. We actually went to a specialist, and the specialist told us that they misread the ultrasound. So, you know, the next month we made dua. We were like, it wasn't misreading of an ultrasound. It was through the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He changed what was going to happen. And, you know, then the child is born. And a few months after that, you know, I was at the masjid, I was heavily involved. And we knew there was a brother who would come by from an organization. I didn't know the name of the organization. I didn't know, like, a year or two later I'd be working for the organization. But there's a brother who comes by and he picks up clothing to send overseas. And so I was like, I want to meet this brother sometime after. And one sister gives me his information. I reach out to him, and this man is Talha. And you know, I'm like, look, I want to be involved. And inside me, I didn't tell him this at that time, but inside me, I was like, I want to be involved because I want to fulfill the legacy or what my mother wanted me to do. So this working for Helping Hand, being a regional manager, is basically like, not only is it a job for me, but it's also like a mission or a responsibility to help out as many widows, orphan children, as many struggling families around the world as I can. Because when we work for Helping Hand, not only do we collect funds, we're not just there to collect the funds, we're there to make sure that they get taken care of responsibly. And so the end people are taken care of. That's what the donors want. And that's what we want as regional managers, area managers, deputy area managers, from the CEO all the way down. Everybody wants to make sure that the funds are responsibly distributed so people are taken care of. And this is, you know, basically the journey that led me to where I am and why I'm sitting here with you today.
Who is Talha?
Who is Talha?
Yeah, that you met. And
Okay.
how did that connection happen? And
Okay.
and because it seems like he kind of had a thing in terms of
Okay.
you getting into Helping Hand.
Okay. Talha was the former regional manager of North Carolina, South Carolina, what's called the Carolinas. And Talha was the first guy I met, right? Talha is this guy who came, he's nicely dressed, but he wasn't like overdressed. He wasn't wearing a suit or a tie. He was driving a very simple car. I believe it was a rental. I don't remember at this point. He was the guy who would come to pick up clothing. That's all we knew him as. We didn't know he fundraises or anything. And Talha is this guy. He's younger than me, subhanAllah. He sat down with me. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, I'm sitting down with this guy. And we have this conversation. He's like, I'm like, what's Helping Hand? I knew about Helping Hand a little bit, but not much. I'd heard the name in passing. And he's like, oh, we're a charity organization. We don't, a lot of donors, they like us. We don't have a super high overhead and stuff like that. You know, all the main points, right? Of what are the values of Helping Hand. And one of the first things I said to him was, I'm very skeptical of charity organizations, especially Muslim ones. I was like, I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'm like, it's just that a lot of times we aren't told what the overhead is. And our masjid has a hard policy that if any organization comes in, you have to tell the overhead. And I was like, if you want to come here, you have to tell us the overhead. And he went over everything in detail. He wasn't trying to sell me on anything, right? He was trying to show me what Helping Hand is and why it's so vital and why it's so important to the Muslim landscape in the United States and to the Muslim landscape around the world. I said, okay. So we sat and we spoke for almost an hour. And I was invested in the conversation because I wanted to help out, but I wanted to know that I'm helping out the right organization as a volunteer, right? There was never an intention to become an employee, right? That was never the intention. And then we have this conversation. Asr time comes in. My father comes. I introduce my father to him and I tell my father who he is. And so, alhamdulillah, everything was good. After this, he calls me again the next day. He handed me this book, this pamphlet, and this little folder with pamphlets and books. And I take it with me. And the next day I'm at my office and I told him to call me the next day. I was like, I want to have a follow-up conversation, right? I'm interested. So he calls me and we go over everything. We go over Brother Javed, who's the CEO, all the way down to like how many regions there are, why they work the way they work, and what he does. I go over everything and he tells me I go to all the cities, I collect the clothing that's in kind, I do orphan sponsorship, like, fundraising and everything, right? And then he tells me so this is something interesting. He's like, he was also testing me to see if I'm actually interested or not in volunteering or helping out. There's a fundraiser next month in South Carolina. Imam Siraj is coming. Can you pick him up from the airport in Charlotte and bring him down to Greenville, South Carolina, which is a 2-hour drive? I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do it. So he's like, okay, that's fine. So he got there early. I picked up Imam Siraj. I dropped him at his room at the hotel. Then I went home, which is like a 20-minute drive. Then when time was there to pick him up, I pick him up and I bring him down to South Carolina. And, Imam Siraj is tired. He's sleeping. We go to the fundraiser. It was a good fundraiser. We come back, I drop Imam Siraj back off. But before I leave, Talha gives me a box. He's like, there's another event in Charlotte. I have another event in Raleigh on the same day for Helping Hand. Can you go to this event? I said, okay, that's fine. He gave me the box. So I go to this event where all the charity organizations are presenting. And there's still pictures of me, I think, in some Helping Hand platform, portfolio or something, which are used of me sitting there, in my yellow thobe. I had this yellow thobe. I'm sitting there with the matching yellow kufi. And, he was just testing me. The next month, he's like, I'm going to Jordan for a Youth for Jordan trip for like 10 days or something. If anybody calls, can I tell them to call you? I said, sure, why not? And so we're going through this and the Ramadan comes. I call him. I'm like, Talha, I want to make a big difference. I was like, I've been doing all these small things. I want to do something big now. I want to make that big splash to help out. He's like, okay, what do you want to do? And he goes through all the programs and I hear orphan support and it clicks. My mother passed away. She wants me to help out kids who have went through a similar journey, but they're kids. I was older. So, and the Islamic opinion of an orphan is a child who's lost their father at this point. Because that's the main breadwinner. You've lost the father. And so I'm like, okay, let's do orphan support. And he's like, okay, how many orphans do you want to sponsor? Like, not me, myself, but how many am I going to fundraise for? I was like, 100. He's like, that's like 37,000. I said, yeah, that's fine. Let's go for it. So he sets up a meeting with Sister Amiko's in charge of orphan sponsorship program. And I didn't know I'd be working with her a few months later. And we're going over this. And this is during COVID, right? And we're not seeing anybody. There's no personal relation or anything like that with anybody. You're just sitting at home. So Talha and me were going over this. And we have a meeting. It's me, Talha, and Sister Amika. And she's telling me all of this orphan sponsorship and everything. And she's like, how many orphans should I set aside? I said 100. I think she was also shocked that somebody's like going out and saying 100. I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's go for it. And so I started calling right after I got off of this meeting. I started calling people, and alhamdulillah, I think we raised close to like 40,000 or something like that. And that that Talha was himself. I think he was a little bit surprised that somebody said they'll do it, and they followed through with it, and they were able to raise more, and they're not an employee of the organization at all. And then after that, we kept talking over the summer, and I was looking to get a little bit more involved. That was one of the steps. And Talha was like, "Hey, do you want to work for the organization?" And I was like, "Let me talk about it with my wife, and let me talk about it with my father. And this is a family decision." And my wife was like, "This is something that's driving you. This is something that's close to your heart. Do it." And that's exactly what I did. When I was given the job opportunity, I did the interviews and everything. And alhamdulillah, we're at this point.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Brother Talha is actually the director of the Youth Empowerment Program now.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So they just came back from
No,
Jordan. Jordan. They came back from
Well, they see
Jordan.
Syrian and Palestinian refugees there, so that's probably what you were thinking.
Right. Exactly. So that's wonderful.
Earlier in the year, they went to Kenya.
They went to Kenya.
And they're probably going, I think, again to Kenya, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but if you're watching and you want to send, one of your college-age children, inshallah, definitely go on the Youth Empowerment page on Helping Hand and look into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're hoping to have him also and have him talk all about it one time.
Inshallah.
Thank you for sharing the story about your mother and that whole thing that came in. And hopefully it was such a heartfelt story.
Yeah.
And filled with wisdom and compassion and a lot of lessons that we can learn just about life in general. And I hope that our audience and viewers out there can really gain the lessons from it. So thank you for that.
Inshallah.
You cover a certain regional managers. They cover certain areas.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So give us a little bit of insight about the area that you cover and generally what the regional managers sort of do in terms of what their area is.
Okay. So I actually have what's considered two regions, which is supposed to be merged into one. I cover Carolinas, which was a separate region, and then I cover Southeast, Mid-Southeast. The names are a little bit flexible, which is basically Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. I basically cover what is the strongest college football area in the United States. So, so what's it called? So I covered this area. We have a few employees, but we have a lot of major cities. Myself and there's another regional manager or two regional managers who cover 5 states each. So North Carolina has Raleigh, the Greensboro area, which is I think called the Triad, and then I'm in Charlotte. I'm based out of Charlotte, right? So we have 3 main areas in North Carolina. Then we have like smaller areas in South Carolina, but the main city really for us is like Greenville, South Carolina. Then we have obviously we have Atlanta. Atlanta is huge. Then Birmingham, Alabama, which is actually, alhamdulillah, we're working very hard. Our area manager there, the sister, she's working very hard, subhanAllah. So we're making a lot of progress there. And then after that, we have Tennessee, which inshallah, we're trying to, break through. Alhamdulillah, we've been doing decent in Tennessee, but we really need to make a breakthrough. But like Tennessee, we have Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. Alhamdulillah, we've been having good relationships and good, connections there. Even so much so that I got a call in Ramadan from the Memphis Islamic Center. The Pakistani Association of Memphis was doing a fundraiser, and they're one of our good relationships that we have in Memphis. And the brother, he calls me, he's like, "Hey, we have a fundraiser here on what was it, on Sunday," and he calls me on Wednesday, the first day of Ramadan, if I'm not mistaken. He's like, "Can you come?" I'm like, I look, and this is the expanse of the region, and I'm looking, and it's a 9.5 hour drive. I'm like, oh God. I was like, I don't want to drive 9.5 hours while I'm fasting. I don't like to miss Ramadan fasting because it's just that feel. Like when you're fasting in Ramadan, although it's allowed because I'm traveling, but you just don't want to miss that feel. So I'm like, okay, let me try to get a flight. So I talked with Brother Ilyas, our director of development. I'm like, Brother Ilyas, this is the situation. Talk with Sheikh Abdurrahman, my direct boss, who's our zonal manager. And they're both like, go. I'm like, okay. I find a flight. The flights, the timings are not bad. I'm like, okay, it's fine. I can do this. I get to the airport. It's raining. My thought process was, I will go get to Memphis, get there before Dhuhr, go to 5 or 10 masajid. They have about 12 or 15 masajid. Go to 5 or 10 of them, put the brochures there so at least people can see the brochures. Maybe meet a few imams, build some more relations, and, get the most benefit out of this trip. Flight gets delayed 2-3 hours. I get there like 4 o'clock. I get to the counter where my rental car is supposed to be. Some glitch in the computer. There's no rental car. I have to call our staff accountant, Brother Manan. He takes care of it. 5 minutes. SubhanAllah. The accounting department and all the other departments, programs, everybody, they're all amazing. So he takes care of it. 5 minutes. I have a car. But by the time all of this passes over, it's, I go hurry up and pray Dhuhr and it's almost Asr time. So I'm like, okay, let me change and go to the masjid. But that's just the expanse of the region. It's so big and there's so many donors that, who call you. They're like, hey, can you do this for us? Can you do an in-kind drive for us? And, in-kind is, one of our major programs, which really brings in a lot of donors. And I'm like, oh man, this is, Memphis asked me for an in-kind drive. Is it possible? Logistically, this year they asked for it. Logistically, it wasn't even possible. And we told them that. And I don't know how they felt about that, but it's such an expansive region. And then obviously with in-kind, you have to get the container to the port. And if we're talking about Memphis, getting it to a port is a 10-hour truck, 12-hour truck ride probably. So that's the expanse of the region. This is how big America is. That when we're covering all this area, it gets pretty difficult, even if you have staff.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the distinctive qualities of the region that you cover? And what are some of the unique opportunities and unique challenges that the area presents?
Okay. So we have a really diverse group of donors, extremely diverse. Obviously, they come from many different backgrounds. And there's a funny story. There's a sheikh of ours, Sheikh Abdurrahman Khan, who was with us a few days ago. He's one of the Ikna Shura members as well. He's at one of the masajid, right? And he always helps us with fundraising. He never asks for anything. He never asks for any honorarium or anything. He loves the organization, right? And so we were at a masjid. This is a Syrian heavy masjid. And I'm a hafiz of the Quran. So, we're fundraising for Syrian orphan children. And in what you were talking about, when the Youth for Jordan trips go, they go and they visit these children in Mafraq and Za'atari and places like this where they're living in. A lot of them are able to live in caravan homes. Some are living in tents and stuff like that. We were fundraising for their education support program or orphan support program, right? To help them with their education. And Sheikh calls me up. He's like, and this is something which is, I talk with a lot of Syrians. They find it funny, but at the same time, it's very like, we feel for them when this happens. Sheikh is like, Hafiz Asad, come up. We have Hafiz Asad here today, and he's raising money for Syrian orphan children. And Hafiz Asad was, basically who's infamous in the Syrian region. And all of the Syrian brothers and sisters were like sort of in shock because of the name. And Sheikh is like, no, this is a brother. He's memorized the Quran. He's a Hafiz of the Quran. His parents didn't name him this on purpose. And then everybody calmed down because it was just like, bringing up people's PTSD and stuff like that. And so, we have a very diverse group of donors. Like you go to Memphis and you meet the Pakistani American Association in Memphis, and that's a whole group. But when you pray Salah there, after the fundraiser, it's people from Yemen, people from Sudan, people from different parts of the Middle East, people from India, everywhere, right? And you're like, oh, okay, there was 500 people for this fundraiser, but when the Salah starts, there's like 1,500 people. And you're like, okay, this is just a small sliver. So wherever you go throughout the region, it's very diverse. It's very different. We went to a city called Gadsden, Alabama. It was myself and one of our program directors, Sheikh Jesse. And we went there. And this is backcountry Alabama. We're driving from Atlanta 2 hours. We passed through this mountain range where Anniston, Alabama is. Anniston, Alabama is this giant mountainous area. And there's a masjid in between the mountains. And it's so beautiful when you drive through there. So the terrain is beautiful. The communities are very diverse. Like I said, Gadsden, Alabama, you get there and you're like, okay, where are we going? It's just like old country roads and there's nothing for miles on certain points in time. And Sheikh Jassi is just sitting there talking. I was like, where are we going? And we get to this masjid and it's like, this masjid, there's a beautiful masjid, small community, but beautiful. They come for iftar together. They pray tarawih together. But it's just like, it's very diverse as far as the people from where they come from. the people who they are, the jobs they have, and overall it's just such a diverse group of people, and you get to see the beauty of Islam through this. But then on top of that, you get to see the beauty of our donor base, that they come from being from the most economically challenged, even because if you live in a small city out there in some distant part of North Carolina or something, even you may not be living like the most prestigious life, right? As what people society considers prestigious, right? Maybe living a very simple life, but their hearts are there, that they want to make the most impact with the dollar that they give. So you get to see that, and really, even as doing fundraising, it really affects us, and it makes us happy when we see that, because a lot of times you go to a masjid, you may not even raise $100 sometimes, and it really brings you down. But you meet that one person who's not as economically blessed, maybe, right? They're not very rich or anything, but they're like, hey, my kid is here with me, and my kid saved up like $10, and he or she wants to give this $10 to make a difference in the life of a refugee child in Rohingya refugee child or something. It really changes your perspective. You may have been down that, oh, we didn't raise like $1,000 or 10,000 or something, but when you see that 10, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at the hearts. He doesn't look at how we physically look. He doesn't look at what we give even. He looks at the intention behind what we give. And when you see that child giving a $10 bill of what he saved throughout the course of Ramadan from doing chores around the house, and we also have something called chores for charity we do in Ramadan, which we incentivize school children. They do this, that they do chores around the house, and their parents give them change. And they bring it to the masjid, and whichever sorry, not masjid, their school, Islamic schools. We work with Islamic schools for this. And they give this money, and whichever class raises the most funds through collecting change, we give them a pizza party.
Mm-hmm.
So those 10 cents, they make a difference in someone's life. And that's the diversity of our region, and that's the diversity of our donor base in Carolinas and Southeast.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about fundraising. Okay. So fundraising is at the core of our mission, right? And your position stretches far beyond that.
Yes.
What are some of the approaches and strategies that you implement to engage the community and foster those relationships to ensure a lasting relationship with the community?
Okay. So we like to go visit a community first. Visit the community, get to know the people. We go a few times before we even approach fundraising. This is the approach we use in my region, and other regions use the same approach. We go, we become friends with the community, not community members, with the whole community. We're not just here for fundraising. We're here to also be a part of your community. We'll go there a few times. Recently, one masjid, they reached out to me. They're like, we want somebody to come give Jummah. I said, okay, I'll come. So I went. But before I went, I sent our area manager, Brother Mohsen. I said, you go give Jummah. I'm out of town this weekend for helping hand. So he went and he gave Jummah. No fundraising. We went again. Last month I went. No fundraising. We build that relationship. We're not just about fundraising. Fundraising is a very important element of our work, but the relationships lead into even more fundraising. That when people see some disaster happen somewhere around the world, or when they think when Ramadan is approaching, they call us. They say, Brother Asad, can you or one of your staff members come in Ramadan to our masjid and fundraise? This is what we want. We want the community to be invested. It's not just about going and getting in front of everybody, in which, what's it called? We were talking before we started. I was asking you, I was like, have you ever done fundraising before? And you're like, no, but I've thought about it. And, I'm like, when you're standing in front of a crowd and you're doing active fundraising, there's many different elements of fundraising. There's one which is just a table, right? We set up the table, people can give money, they ask questions, right? The next element is an appeal. You go in front of the community, they give you a minute or two, you talk about the project, and then people give money. The next one is, semi-active fundraising, where you give a hard appeal and you give amounts for people to give. And then the last one is active fundraising, which is you see this as masajid, their fundraising dinners, where they're like, okay, who's going to give 10,000? You raise your hand. It's like auction style, right? A lot of people shy away from that. A lot of people can't even do it because of stage fright and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's not easy. So, we do all of these things, but at the end of the day, when you're standing in front of people and you're asking them to raise their hands and nobody's raising their hands, and you're just like, you start sweating, and it's cold sweat. It's coming really fast. It's like your forehead gets filled with sweat, but it's one of those elements of fundraising. But we're not just there to raise those hands, right? Those hands, when you raise them, there's an important element of it. Like recently, we went to a fundraiser, and we were raising funds after the Syrian Turkish earthquakes. We were building some houses for Syrian individuals. We were building 2 villages, and what had happened is we went to this one masjid, and we were trying to raise funds for maybe 5 to 10 houses, right? That was the goal. That was the idea, right? So when we start our fundraiser, he spoke with me, and I drove 6 hours for this fundraiser, and I speak with the fundraiser. MashaAllah, subhanAllah, is amazing sheikh. And we talk, and as we're talking, he's like, what is your goal? I was like, Sheikh, we don't have any goal. I was like, whatever. No, you must have a goal. I was like, let's say 10. And he's like, okay, we'll do more than 10. We'll raise funds for more than 10 houses. Each house was 5,000 or something. So Sheikh gets up, and these 2 friends had told me beforehand that we're going to get together, the neighbors and their best friends. We're going to get together, and we're going to go 50-50. I said, okay, that's fine, but still raise your hand. They're like, okay, we'll do that. So they raised their hand that we're sponsoring a house together. After that, subhanAllah, we had 12 more people raise their hands. So we were able to raise funds for approximately 12 or 13 houses, or even more. And it was because of those 2 brothers raising their hands. As soon as the fundraiser started, they raised their hands. And everybody else got confidence that if these 2 guys who are stakeholders in the community have faith in this organization and know they're honest and reliable, all of us should have the same opportunity, and all of us should take advantage of this opportunity, because giving funds is not just about raising your hand or anything like that. It's about making a difference in someone's life. That house is not just a house for those people. It's a refuge, and it's a safe haven for people who've become homeless or for people who've become displaced. Like we have the caravan home program, which when they go for the Youth for Jordan trips, they usually go visit those. And when our donors go overseas, some of them, like we have some donors who are doctors, they go and they visit when they go for medical trips. I have a donor who goes for medical trips. He goes and he tries to go see those houses. And, they want to see those houses. We send out pictures afterwards of when the houses are installed and stuff like that. But people go to see those houses, and they're like, when they see those houses, and we send out a report which has the story of who this person is or who the family is, you'll read the stories and you'll cry. There'll be women who have lost their husbands, who've lost multiple children, who are staying in these houses, right? With 2 or 3 of their kids. And, they were staying in tents for years before, and now they're in a house. And it really, it's changed their life. Then we'll have the schoolhouses out there with those houses, and their kids now they have a house. They have, stable incoming of food. They have, clean water. They're able to use the bathroom. They don't have to go out. Talha used to tell me this before I joined even, that some of the people, they have these little tent type things, and they have to use the bathroom out there. And it reminds you of the stories of the Sahaba, where the women would have to go together to go use the bathroom outside of the city, or they would have to go together to, go shower and stuff like this, because they didn't have the hammam or the bathroom inside of the houses. And, it reminds you that there's still people living like this. And if you can make a difference in their life, why shouldn't you? What's stopping me from making a difference in somebody's life? If I have even $10, I can, I can give it to some organization. Helping Hand is, obviously we work for Helping Hand. We believe it's the best. Give it to Helping Hand, and somebody can get a food package. If I have $100, it's Qurbani time. Somebody who's living in some country, maybe Pakistan, maybe Uganda, somewhere like this, and they get meat, and this may be the only meat they eat. And so it's not just about fundraising, raising the hands, or how much, are we raising 1,000? Are we raising 10,000? Are we raising 1,000,000? It's about making that difference through the fundraising. Because if it was just about the amounts, we wouldn't care about the communities, but we care about the communities, and we care about those people. I'm not just talking about the people overseas who we're helping, our beneficiaries. I'm talking about the donors. We care about them. And when they call us, sometimes we'll get calls at 7 a.m. from donors. And sometimes it's like you had just went to sleep after Fajr, and you're like, is my phone ringing him off? Like, wake up, your phone's ringing. Pick it up before one of the kids wakes up. And I pick up the phone, and the donor's like, Hey, are you coming to our masjid? We have some clothing. It's like, okay, that's fine. I'll come tomorrow or something. It's like, oh, okay, that's fine. We collected a few bags, although you haven't asked them to, but they did. So you're like, okay, you foster that relationship. Fundraising is about fostering relationships. Fundraising is about making sure that people here are satisfied with the donation that they give and how it's being taken care of overseas.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. And the power of fundraising, the power of zakat, the
Yeah.
power of sadaqah is in the numbers, right? So
Yeah.
even if you give just a little bit, I mean, the power of every penny matters and counts is
Absolutely.
so real. It's
Yeah.
so real, and it's really in the power of numbers. So no amount is too small. Is
Absolutely.
real. You
Yeah.
know, that's so real. Do you feel like there is a like like an approach that works better than others, or that is sort of like the more effective approach?
Okay, so what's it called? Having spent time with ulama, with scholars, the scholars of what's it called? The scholars who are my teachers, the scholars who I follow, they have something like a mahfil approach, where they sit down with people, and they give like a religious, like not a talk. It's not like a bayan, like a straight up bayan, but it's like a sort of like a reminder of our
What's the approach called? Sorry.
mahfil, where you have like a gathering.
Okay.
Yeah, a gathering approach, right? Where you sit, they have like mahfil husni qira'at and stuff like that. So it's, but not that big, obviously. You sit with like 10 or 20 people, right? And you sit with them and you talk with them and you tell them about their responsibilities to mankind. You talk to them about their responsibilities to this deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And taking care of humanity, right? We're not just in the business of taking care of Muslims at Helping Hand. We're in the business of taking care of everybody. Obviously, if you give zakat, it's only distributed to Muslims because there are requirements on that. But the rest of the funds, we help out people, right? Everybody. If somebody, a hungry individual comes in Pakistan who happens to be a Christian, they will get taken care of. If a hungry individual comes in Uganda and they may be a Christian or an animist, they will be taken care of. It doesn't matter where they come from, right? We're about taking care of people, right? So we'll sit down with a few donors. This was the first after I joined Helping Hand. One of the first fundraisers we did. It was me and Talha. We went to some people invited us over. They were like, we're interested, but we want to hear more. They weren't skeptical, but they didn't know what to expect, right? So we sit down with, there's a few brothers and their brother-in-law. We sit down with them and they're like, we want to donate, but we want to donate a larger amount, but we want a larger project. I said, okay. We started talking to them about caravan homes. And we have something called matching gift program as well, which if you work for a certain company, if you give, for example, 5,000, the company may match the 5,000. If you give 10,000, the company may match the 10,000. So we're sitting with these brothers. They have their own business. And they're like, okay, we want to give 2 caravan homes, right? And their brother-in-law, he works for some company that does matching gift. He's like, okay, I'll give 1 and my company will match it. So we're sitting with them, and we, for the first 30 minutes, we didn't talk about Helping Hand or fundraising. We just spoke about who they are, wanted to know who they are. This was during at the tail end of the first year of COVID. So we're sitting outside. That's what the guidelines said: sit outside if you want to talk with anybody. We're sitting outside on this like deck, and we're just talking and having a good conversation. They're like, and usually this is what we wait for, right? For them to say what how can we help? I had another donor one time I met. We met for iftar and I spoke with him for an hour, right? I knew he wanted to donate. That's why he was meeting me. But I didn't talk about the project. I wanted him to ask about it. So he's invested. Or if you talk with the sister, she's invested. You want the donor to be invested in the project. And so you let them ask you, because the reason you're meeting them, they know why you're meeting them, but you want them to be more invested in it. So what's it called? These brothers we met, they donated for these houses, right? These brothers and their brother-in-law and everybody, and we got the matching. The same, what's it called? The house that got sponsored, the name came on it. The brother, he sent me the picture. I'm so happy. I'm so overjoyed by this, that there's a family living there. And then in the report, mashallah, Hafiz Amjad, who does the reports, he has the whole story of the family, like I said earlier, who's living there. I'm so happy. The same report I showed to this other brother, he's like, I want to sponsor 4 of these houses, right? So it's just, it's about sitting with these people, letting them know what's going on. And, it just makes this difference. And like you said, it's money counts, but it's not about the amount. It's if you give $1, make a difference in somebody's life, you will see the results in this dunya and in the akhirah.
MashaAllah. Speaking of approaches to fundraising,
Yeah.
how do you feel? What do you feel is the future? Times are changing so fast.
Yeah.
Technology is changing. Things are happening. Very dynamic.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the future for us in terms of fundraising approaches? And how are we going to adapt to these changing circumstances?
Okay. So one of the things we have to realize is the Muslim element of fundraising, which comes from the Sunnah and the Hadith of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where when he was, I don't want to say fundraising, but when he was asking for the Sahaba for, what they can give, and we know the famous Hadith of Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu bringing whatever he could, and Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu, bringing half of that, and so on and so forth. So the element or the reality of fundraising will always be that of us trying to compete with each other, us being in a community environment. We can't get away from that. That's something that will always be there. Now, how the community dynamics will change, that's something we have to realize and acknowledge. One thing which we do at Helping In Now, obviously, is a heavy emphasis on reporting back. All the regional managers are reporting back. We now have a sister who's a reporting manager whose sole job is to report back to donors. We have Brother Elias who's reporting back to donors. We have MGOs reporting back to donors. Everybody's giving you these reports. Very detailed, very intricate, point by point. You donated for this, you donated for this, you donated for this, right? This is a very important element. And then obviously the stewarding and talking to donors and going to meet them. And these things will not change. But obviously the element of reporting back, I think that's going to take it to another level. The methods of fundraising, obviously with AI really taking the lead on things, how are we going to use it? Is there going to be fundraising AI? We already have customer retention management systems that most organizations, including ourselves, use. How will AI change that? These are things obviously we don't know yet. We're still going out to masajid. We're still going out to communities. We're still doing fundraising dinners, which, we have a few in a few weeks. We're still doing all of those things, but it's just the small elements. How are we going to change them? Like if we go to a convention, for example, right? We're looking to change instead of from a physical model to a more digital model, right? Where people can come, they can give the donations. The past convention, I wasn't there, but I'm part of the convention committee. And for Muna, we had like a digital screen where people, before what we were doing is we would have walls. I don't know. I think you've seen the walls, have you?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the walls and you put a sticker on the wall that's sponsored, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now instead of that, we go on the computer and like something pops up on the screen, sponsored. So, small changes, and people are like, oh, okay, you're not wasting as many like resources. There's no paper now. The clean green idea of, going paperless and stuff like that. We're also adopting that. This past Jummah, I gave, instead of printing out the flyers for Libya and Morocco, I had them on an iPad. So if somebody wanted to know the projects, they could scroll back and forth. Just trying to be as innovative as we can, using technology for good, using technology for benefit, saving resources, things like this, whatever we can do the best. Instead of having to go out to a fundraiser, to a masjid, maybe one of the community members does it. So not only does the community member get involved, but it's from one amongst them, right? It makes a big difference when somebody from amongst the community is fundraising. Like, we spoke about raising your hand. If the community members raise their hand, it raises the street cred, basically. Oh, okay, this organization is legit, right? Like that. If one from amongst the community, and this is something we engage with our youth coordinator, Brother Talha, he reaches out to communities. He tries to get MSAs involved in masajid to do the fundraising. So using those approaches of getting people from within the locality to take the lead, right? Obviously, the digital elements, when we do marketing, we use geofencing for events and stuff like that. Doing all of those things, just being smart about it. And, not going away from the core or the root of what is fundraising, but just using the newer approaches and the newer elements to make it better. That's what I feel. I mean, I may be wrong, but this is what I feel how it goes. Because you can't lose that human touch. Like, if the fundraiser is there, like I go, like I went to Memphis. When I was in Memphis, wallahi, so many people came to me. They wanted to talk with me, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. Everybody wanted to just sit and talk with me and ask about what project they can do. And some of the projects we could do, and some of them we couldn't. There were some very intricate projects which we couldn't do because it isn't our scope. Like, we may provide like a solar submersible, a solar well project or something like that, right? But if somebody wants to install a whole solar system, solar powered system to power up like a whole village or something, we're not really doing that. Like, maybe we're not capable of it yet, or maybe we're not involved in that project yet. Inshallah, maybe one day we will be. But like, you sit down, you listen to them, you're like, okay, brother, we can't do this, but what about this? And then they think about it for a few minutes. And, oh, okay, that's fine, we can do that. But that, like I said, the human being there in front of you makes a big difference in how donors see us. So we can't ever get away from that, but we can change a lot of the things which we do around us, like, the printing, the brochures, stuff like that, maybe saving money on it, and, not only saving money, but also being environmentally friendly. I think, there's a lot of things which we can change and adapt, as we move forward to make people feel more comfortable that Helping Hand is an organization which is taking care of the needs of not only the donors, but also adapting with technological advances. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, for sure, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about events. Events are a big deal for us. We have a lot of events.
Yeah.
Are there any particular? Well, let's just say they're very exciting, but they come with their challenges.
Yes.
Very challenging to put on. They can be very exciting. They're very challenging.
Yeah.
Are there any particular events that you can recall that stand out for you, that were really memorable for you, or perhaps any particular stories that happened at an event in which a community member did something that had an effect that stretched out all the way to the beneficiary, and you were able to make that connection to the community member or that particular event?
Okay. Event wise, I got hired during COVID. So I've had, compared to a lot of other like regional area managers, I've had a lot less exposure to events. But, like I've traveled a good bit for, Ramadan, right? I don't know if exactly I can point out any event like that, but I do remember last year when we were at the ICNA convention, right? We were at the ICNA convention, and we usually have like a talk in front of like youth empowerment or something like that. And we had a brother who was at that time, he was with the organization. He's not with us now. He went and he gave this talk, right? And people were coming and they were donating, and there was small donations happening, right? One orphan sponsored, one education for a child sponsored, right? And we're there, and Sister Amika is there, a few other brothers, Saad and Sari, who's a regional manager for Houston, is there. All of us were there. And what happens is the talk was about refugees and how we help them and how we help educate them. This is a youth empowerment talk. So we're talking about when they make that trip, what happens over there? They meet these children who are looking for an education, and what we take for granted in the West, education, they can't get it and they really want it. They want to advance. They want to help their people out. They want to help the whole world out. The brother said maybe there was like 10 or 15 people in this talk. Whole auditorium, you can fit 1,000 people or something. It's 10 or 15 people. When you see 10 or 15 people, you're like, okay, maybe somebody will come down and one person will donate, right? One person comes down. It's a sister, and she's telling her story that she's a refugee, right? She sponsors both sides of the wall.
Wow. MashaAllah.
She sponsors both sides of the wall. She's like, I want them all. And she pays for it right then and there.
Mm.
And this was the element of a refugee feeling for other children who may be refugees. Who may be, a lot of them were like Palestinian and Syrian refugee children living in Zaatari and Mafraq and Jordan. Felt for them. And there were other children who weren't refugees. She felt for all of them, and she donated for all of them. And so that's something that stood out to me, that it's that human touch. It's also that, that feel that I've been through this as well. How can I give back? And you see it all the time with people like, we'll see people who are maybe from Pakistan, right? When the flood happened last year, they're like, how can we help? Right? Then when they go to Pakistan, they call me. They're like, hey, I just got a call from, he's actually a friend of mine. He's like, I'm in Pakistan. How can I go visit people? And so, we got him in touch with our local team. And, inshallah, they're trying to arrange for him to go visit some of the projects and stuff. So people are invested, donors are invested. We just have to facilitate, whatever we can for it to make a difference in their life.
Yeah, it's very transformational
Yeah.
for them there. Mashallah. What motivates you to continue this dedicated work?
The stories. The stories motivate me. We hear the story about this child. We hear the story about this family. We hear the story, for example, one of the stories, having memorized the Quran, one of the stories which really motivates me and, makes me emotional is they have in Irbid in Jordan, they have, Syrian and Palestinian refugees, right? So we had found out that some of those kids, they were also memorizing the Quran. So I believe that year there were 70 children who memorized the Quran or something. It was some amount like that, or who were in the program. And that year along, so I think 70 children finished the Quran, memorizing it, right, that year. And then there was a second part to the story that amongst them, there were almost like 40 or 45 widows who were also memorizing the Quran, who also finished memorizing the Quran. They become hafizahs of the Quran. And I'm like, they may not have a proper house. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't have any, what's it called, income source. Their kids are orphans, right? They don't have any guardian over them, right? Helping Hand is their guardian at this point, right? All of this is out there. All of these challenges are out there. They don't know what's going to happen with them. But their tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so strong that they're memorizing the Quran. And they want to please Rabbul Alameen subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they're sitting there through all of their situations and they're still memorizing the Quran. What we take for granted. Do I do enough revision myself as a hafiz of the Quran? It made me think of this. When I was in Pakistan and when I finished in Atlanta, did I take it for granted? The easy life I had, where these women and these children, they don't have the easy life I do. They don't have that easy life, but they're still so dedicated to the Quran. I'm like, wow, right? Then you hear stories about, people, for example, who walk, the youth for Kenya trip, they went, the sisters and the brothers, they went in January. And they saw these people who walk like 5 miles for a can of water. And the water is not even clean. The water is not even clean. And they're walking 5 miles, right? And we have these water bottles here with us. Nobody can see them. But do we even finish them? A lot of masajid, they went away from water bottles. And the reason they went away was because people were wasting so much water. In our masajid, we bring small bottles. And even then, people take a sip and they leave it on the side and we throw it away. In our masjid, my local masjid, we put the water in the plants, right? That's a better use of it, but it's waste. We're not only are we damaging the environment by means of plastic and stuff like that, most of us are not recycling it, but at the same time, the water we're wasting. These people they're essentially dying of water, dying of not having water, sorry. And we're taking it for granted. Dr. Mufti Abdurrahman ibn Yusuf, he mentions many times in his talks about how, we're in the age where we're dying of having too much food. Like most of us, we're getting sicknesses, illnesses, maladies, diseases from the diets we have. And you still have people out there who don't have anything, right? And I remember a story, Talha went on one of the earlier youth for Haiti trips, right?
Shout out to brother Talha.
Hey.
His name has come up so much, mashallah.
Yeah.
Much love, shout out.
Talha's the one who helped me become the person I am in helping him.
Mashallah, yeah.
So, I can never stop thanking him for that. He told me a story about when they went to Haiti and they had these like little water bottles, right? And he was like, we were giving them out to all of the kids. And he's like, there were so many kids. He's like, we ran out of water bottles, right? And then he's like, I had one bottle of water. He's like, it was for me, obviously, because obviously when we go on overseas trips, even as not as working for Helping Hand, when we go on our personal trips, generally speaking, we don't consume the water of the locality because our bodies are not used to it. I go to Pakistan all the time. I take my kids now. We don't consume the local water. We usually get like filtered or bottled water because if we don't, the body immediately reacts in the opposite way you don't want it to. So he's like, add that. He's like, I'm putting it in the lid and giving each child a lid full of water. He's like, and they're happy with this. He's like, kids get happy when you give them bread, plain bread. I don't know if my own kids would eat plain bread. And these kids will be happy with plain bread. It just goes to show you that what we have, we take it for granted, right? We really take it for granted. And, they were telling the story, the sisters who went right now to Jordan, they were telling the story about how they went to go visit some of the beneficiaries, right? And they had nothing. Whatever ration or whatever they were given had been finished, right? And so they were offering them water. Like, this is all we have. And the sisters, they brought in food. They had food with them and they brought it inside, like desserts and stuff like that. And it's like, no, we can't take this. You're our guest. We can't take this from you. And it just goes to show you that those people have so much, the beneficiaries, they have so much love and respect for us as organizational workers. They have so much love and respect, and they make so much dua for the donors that the calamities we avert and the calamities we avoid by means of the dua, we don't even know this. That the effect that these people have in our lives, we don't know this. And we don't offer enough shukr, we don't offer enough thanks to those people. That although we are collecting the funds, or the donors are giving those funds, we don't know the power of those du'as that come our way. We really don't. Those du'as, they're so, they're so khalis, they're so clean, they're so pure, and they're for us. Specifically, if Mamdouh makes a $1 donation, there's a donor out there making a dua for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening to that dua. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making sure that dua is applied to Mamdouh. That dua is applied to Asad. That dua is applied to Jamal. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes sure those du'as are getting applied to us. And we don't know how lucky and how blessed we are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He didn't make us lucky. Sorry. The donors are not the lucky ones. We're the lucky ones. Because we have an opportunity to give from what we have. We have an opportunity to give from what we have. We're in need.
Giving.
We're in need of giving.
Right.
We're in need of giving.
We need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This should become a short clip. We're in need of giving. So what's it called? Really, we don't know how blessed we are to get this opportunity, because there's people out there who are billionaires who don't give a single penny. Right? They have so much money. They have the nice houses. They have the nice cars. Like, I made this, the words of Qarun, I made this, not an exact, but essentially the idea. I made this myself. I am a self-made billionaire. This is what's flying around right now. And even though all this is flying around, you have people out there who maybe in Ramadan, they don't even have enough money to give for zakat, right? They don't meet the nisab, but they're still giving thousands of dollars in sadaqah, because they don't want somebody out there to be left hungry in the month of Ramadan. They don't want some child to go without water or education or food in the month of Ramadan. It just goes to show you that it's a full circle. It's not just donor to beneficiary and that's it, and then helping hand in between, right? It's a full circle. And we really have to appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to be a part of that full circle.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. I really wish that everyone out there can have the opportunity to be a recipient and a beneficiary of those du'as.
I mean, absolutely.
Right? And how can people get involved in their communities? How can they get involved in their communities to begin to make a difference? What are some simple steps they can take to begin this journey?
We have so many different programs, right? We spoke about Chores for Charity very briefly. We spoke about it. From the kids to the elders, everybody can be involved in helping hand. If you feel skeptical about offering donations from your community, and it's fine. People are skeptical of offering donations before they know very well about an organization. That's a perfectly understandable part of the journey. Do an in-kind drive, clothing drive. Call your local office. Maybe you're in some state like Kansas or something, and you call the Texas office and you're like, hey, who can come out to us? Like brother Asif Qureshi from St. Louis can come out to you. He's over, the state of Kansas, something like that. And then he's like, okay, maybe we can arrange, or maybe you call me and you're in Tennessee. You're like, can we do an in-kind drive? Inshallah, we'll try to facilitate it the best that we can. Like, bring out all the clothing you can. We need 650 boxes to send a container. Okay, you can't do that. You have an Islamic school. Let's do chores for charity, right? You don't have an Islamic school. You have a Sunday school. We can do something for the Sunday school. We go out to youth programs and we give talks. We go out to youth programs. We recently, I think it was earlier this year, in the Raleigh area, there was a bonfire. And we're like, we don't want anything, right? Helping Hand doesn't want any funds, right? We want to be out there. We'll give the talk for the youth bonfire, and we'll talk about how can you help out. That's what we spoke about. We get invited by MICNA, Muslim Children of North America. They ask us to come out to their halakat, and we talk before Ramadan. I was asked to give a talk, and I asked the children at home to try to finish a juz every day, like, a little bit older children. As again, for every juz that you finish, your father and mother will donate $1. And I asked the parents, I was like, are you okay with that? And some of the parents were like, we'll even donate 10, because obviously this is encouraging their kids to finish a juz. Obviously it's like increasing the greed of the kid, like, oh, okay, I can give more sadaqah by finishing more juz, right? Ajza, what's it called? Multiple of juz. And what's it called? So, just try to encourage kids that way. Adults, okay? You can volunteer at one of our warehouses, or you can help facilitate in-kind drive, or you can help raise the funds yourself. If you're in an MSA, or you go to a college, you can set up a fundraiser, a launch good or something like that. Work with us. We'll set up a launch good page where everybody will donate, and maybe together, like, UNC Chapel Hill MSA, they can get together and they can maybe fundraise a water well. This is just an example. Or UNC Charlotte, my alma mater, the MSA students over there, they can fundraise to sponsor education support for one child in, Mafraq or somewhere, who can go to a college or university and, maybe get some higher education. And you get to see the long lasting effects of that. There's so much the young people can do. The older people, they can, if they go on their overseas trips to visit their families, they can contact the local office. We'll set everything up so you can go visit a local project. Many people, they actually go and they go visit the local projects and they go see them. And it really affects their hearts that they're like, wow, that our community can make this big of a difference in somebody's life. There's communities out there, like we've had many ulama and shuyukh who went with this before. One of the more prominent ones is Imam Siraj. He went to Africa where we installed the water well. And you see Imam Siraj, it's on one of our flyers, where he's using the water well to pump out water. So people can see the benefit of their donation, and they can go and see the benefit of their donation. And like the older people, they can advocate. They can just remind people, hey, look, this is a good organization. I've donated to them before. They do great work. Not only did I donate, I went and I saw their project. I know they're regional workers. They're very good, very humble people. If we are, inshallah we are. So, you do all of that and you're like, okay, they're making a difference, but they're trying to keep the beneficiaries, they're trying to keep donors, everybody in mind. And they're also, at the same time, they're also trying to be very conservative with their overhead. That, they're not trying to spend way too much money or anything like that. So, it goes from the youngest to the eldest. Like what we do with our children is we have them sometimes put the money in the donation jar, right? Put it in the donation jar so they get that feeling. Like if you have a child, you just give them the money, but like, hey, put it in the donation jar. And the child's like gets empowered. The next time your child would ask you give them one, they'll ask for two. Eventually they might get out of hand and they might start asking for a few hundred. And then you might be like, okay, we're getting a little bit out of hand now. Let's keep it under control. But, you encourage that spirit of giving. Giving is living, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. MashaAllah, Brother Asad. MashaAllah, what a amazing, compelling podcast. Well, thank you so much. And
No
maybe if there is, very briefly, I know there's been a lot. If there's one final message that you can give to our audience, very briefly, what would that be?
What would it be? That's a good question. Very good question. The brother has asked a very good question. Inshallah, I'll give the answer. You know where that's from, right? The brother's asked a very good question.
No.
No? Dr. Zakir Naik?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the brother's asked a very good question.
Oh, you're asking for that's right. That's right.
So what's it called? See how you can make the most impact. Go on the HHRD website, look through all of our campaigns, look through all of our programs, right? Find the one which you feel the most for. Read about it. Go on different websites, read about it. Call the local HHRD office, speak with the area manager, regional manager, call the HHRD main office, speak with somebody. Find out all the details you can about the project. Find out overhead, find out our transparency on overhead. Go on Charity Navigator, look at our 990 reports, look at everything, right? Get very comfortable with the project and be like, this is my project for life. This is what I'm going to make a difference for. If it's OSP and you want to sponsor one orphan up until they reach the age of maturity, be like, this is my orphan, this is my child, and I'm going to take care of them. You want to donate for a water well and you want to do it every year. Get very familiar with the project, get very familiar with the processes, speak with our Water for Life department, find out about it, and get really invested in it. And make this your path to Jannah. Make this your path to success. Make this the path of success for your family. Because when everything fades away, when everything goes away, when we've passed away from this world, the lasting impact you have will be the sadaqah that you gave, the pious children you raised, and who you encouraged to give the sadaqah, the child you helped get an education who makes dua for you. These will be the things that make a difference in your life, in this life and in the hereafter. That water well you installed, after I pass away, that water well I installed, people keep drinking water out of it. They keep making dua for whoever this guy was who installed this water well. And those good deeds continue to come. And they continue to enhance my levels in the akhirah. I will be thankful I did that. So that's my message. Get invested in a project and make it your life mission to help more people via that project.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Brother Asad, thank you so much. And Helping Hand is truly very lucky to have you and everyone else that are so dedicated to this work and making such an impact worldwide. So Jazakallahu khair.
Well, yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us. And we wish you all the best. May Allah give you all the reward and give you all the success in the future.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair.
As we've listened to Brother Asad's journey, we invite you to reflect on the unique potential within your own community. Whether you reside in the East Coast, the West Coast, any region, any corner of the world, remember that the impact of your involvement, whether through volunteering, supporting local causes, or fostering connections within your neighbors, is immeasurable. Community engagement is the heartbeat of positive change. Thank you for joining us and for embracing the power of your community's potential. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.